What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming in once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats in a movement skill deep dive here in relation to Myles Garrett, our 2025 Mover of the Year. And in this video that accompanies our Mover of the Year analysis, I dive into what would happen if Myles Garrett and myself, the Movement Miyagi, were to join forces and what it is that my approach would center around based on what I've seen from his nearly 900 snaps in the 2025 season, and then tracing back through his form of life, his 9 NFL seasons, his time at Texas A&M before that, and what his real way of doing, being, and acting as a problem solver, as a mover on a football field is really oriented and centered around. And I think there's some things that we might be able to leverage to make the best defensive player currently playing in the NFL today the greatest defensive player to have ever played the game. I do believe that Myles Garrett does have that type of potential to be in that Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Ed Reed type of conversation, to be the most dexterous, the most skillful defensive player to have ever played the game. And at 30 years old, he still has some tread left on the tires in order to chase and pursue that very highest expression of dexterity as a defensive player. So without further ado, let's get into this. Remember, it is purely speculative. It is not meant to be a diss or any derogatory type of fashion towards either the Cleveland Browns and what they do with him or Myles Garrett's current performance team. All it is me speculating, utilizing a problem solver paradigm, how it would be applied in the training of Myles Garrett. So as we look at this, remember, my entire lens is oriented around this idea of dexterity, the ability to solve any emerging movement problem under any situation and under any condition. And unless this is the first time you've heard me speak about these ideas, this is really what we want to center all analysis around, but then also our practical applications, what we do on a day-to-day in our practice activity design, and what we might be able to do as coaches to help facilitate a more skillful execution, a more skillful process of solving problems, emerging movement problems. They are unpredictable, they are alive, they're indeterminate. They will emerge and they'll decay and they'll present themselves to you or to the respective player. And this again is across situations and across conditions. So it isn't in this really narrow lens or scope. It is much bigger than that. What could happen across various situations? That is really what led me, again, in those nearly 900 snaps, to be able to deem and determine Myles Garrett, best of the best, most skillful as it comes, because he's the most dexterous. Now, that dexterity, Bernstein would go on to say in Dexterity in Its Development in 1996, that it's not within the movements or actions themselves, but it is only revealed in how those movements unfold, how they behave, how they relate to the environment, how they interact with the environment. And that environment that Myles Garrett is placed within, or any of the 1,696 players walking the face of the planet, it presents unexpectedness and surprises. And for Myles Garrett, when you really dive into the film, we see that aliveness. We see those perturbations. We see those challenges. He gets doubled and tripled. He gets chipped and held and tried to be bullied. Like, you can't bully Myles Garrett, but they try to. And when I say they, I mean the opposing team's offense, right? They are presenting anything and everything they possibly can to him to try to deter him in his way of doing one thing. The one thing that he was really set on this earth to do, which is sack the quarterback, to chase and pursue and pressure and create chaos in and around the quarterback. But really what we've seen in 2025, of course, his 23 NFL record-setting sacks would tell us this, is no one has been able to do it better. No one has been able to interact with that environment, its unexpectedness and surprises, nearly to the same degree, at least as an edge rusher, as Myles Garrett number 95 for the Cleveland Browns. Unexpectedness, surprises, this interaction, all of those things are going to be very vital as we get deeper into the practical implications that would feed into what we would do if I were to ever partner with Myles Garrett. Now, if you haven't interacted with anything across 2025 at Football Beyond the Stats, you might not know that our theme for this year was Wuxin. This idea of having a state or being in a state of no-mindedness, having such a clear mind that one can interact with the what is that's in front of us. That unexpectedness and surprises for a defensive end is typically part of that what is on any given snap. Myles Garrett himself, even though he may have a rush plan when he approaches the line of scrimmage, what you really see from him pop off the screen is how he's living and breathing this Wuxin state of mind, how he isn't overly attached to one way of doing, being, and acting. He isn't attached to what might be there. He isn't attached to what he looks like from the outside observer looking in. The only thing he really cares about is playing the game with his entirety of his spirit. And he trusts his instincts and his spirit to drive how he solves these movement problems. So it just so happened to coincide very, very nicely. Wuxin, our theme for 2025, and that's exactly what played out in my NFL player learning environments. It fed right into how Myles Garrett actually solves problems on a football field. The other aspect of Myles Garrett that we really want to recognize, you can watch all 23 sacks, and I would implore you to do so, whether it's through my slow motion analysis that I provided in the Mover of the Year deep dive, or whether it's just watching the 7 minutes or 6 minutes of the 23 sacks in their entirety. Or if you go through all of the snaps that he had across 2025 or dating back over these previous 8 seasons leading up to this 9th year, you will see why I associate Myles Garrett to this lion or a tiger, some sort of big type of freaking cat in the jungle chasing its prey. And the thing is, guys and gals, you can't help but notice it. He's just chasing, pursuing, constant in this predator way of doing, being, and acting. Just chasing unsuspecting quarterbacks and running backs who are trying to fight, holding on for dear life to get the hell out of the way. But Myles Garrett, sort of like you can see with this lion, just super chill in his way of doing, being, and acting in this predator way. And I believe that this is something that we would need to leverage, sort of not only just as a spirit animal, if you will, but just even setting and crafting practice activities, designing our problems that would ask these types of things of Myles. So we give him the canvas to go do it and be it. And I don't believe, at least from my own paradigm, that instructing him down to the minor minutia of how to do, be, and act would actually leverage this type of instinct, this type of form of life, nearly the same degree that I think he probably would really enjoy and be invigorated by. Now, the game brings that out of him, but I'm not exactly sure how practice or training might do it. I think he might be a little inundated with, well, that's the way I need to do it, and this is what actually happens. But let's not forget, Myles Garrett, we can talk about NFL players being the 1%. Myles Garrett is the 1% of that 1%. And he is the extreme example of extraordinary adaptability that usually came from compensation. He's the world's best compensator, the world's best adapter right now as it speaks. And I think what we need to look at is how much his practice environment could actually, I don't want to say hinder, but Myles Garrett is going to Myles Garrett no matter what, I guess is my point, because he's the lion in the jungle. But right now, some of the things that he may or may not be doing could be rather zoo-like. But instead, if we put him back in the jungle on a day-to-day, year-to-year, I believe that he actually could be even better. That's my speculation anyway. Because when we really watch the film, we see the lion in the jungle. We see the lion chasing, smelling blood in the water, sniffing and hunting out that which what he wants, which is a quarterback on the ground. There's some aspects and some nuances of this, particularly with the opportunities that I believe that we could leverage, or at least those opportunities that we could utilize as objectives, learning objectives of our practice environment that could take Myles Garrett from here, best of the best, most dexterous walking the planet as we speak at this moment, to there, greatest of all time as a defensive player. And I believe that's kind of what Myles Garrett, like that's the next rung. That's the next box to check. We see him chasing the likes of Caleb Williams or my 2024 mover of the year, Lamar Jackson. And of course, he sees Lamar twice a year. So that sparring engagement is one that becomes a battle in a nuanced chess match between movement skill. But we see this over and over again. But look at how he is positioned and what he is doing, even in the process of solving these respective problems. Yes, they are just still shots. Yes, they are just snapshots of moments in time. But we can see the lion in the jungle chasing its prey. And I believe that creates this big global intention. So whether it's somebody who's in Myles Garrett's corner on his performance team, his health and wellness team, or whether it's somebody who's trying to interject as a movement and skill acquisition specialist or coach to help facilitate more skillful problem solving for the most skillful already doing it, or whether it's the coaches at the Cleveland Browns and what they're doing in player development, what they're doing in his defensive line room, one of these doesn't look like the other, right? Myles Garrett interacting with an inanimate object, thinking that he's chasing skill. But if we're thinking about skill being about a functional, adaptive, reciprocal relationship between oneself and an environment that is constantly changing, which is how I view skill to be, and we're talking about someone who's adapting and evolving their skill set, the nuances, the ways they solve the problems, what they're perceiving, what they're cognizing, and how they're adaptively acting. We need to immerse oneself in the aliveness that we see on the shot that's right below me. Myles Garrett facing emerging movement problems with unexpectedness, surprises, perturbations, challenges that he didn't even know were going to come. We can never see too much of that because we can never have too much adaptability. So I believe that if everything was harnessed around Myles being put in these places where he is stretched to his challenge point on a daily, even now at 30 years old, even now after 9 years in the NFL, even now after being called the most dexterous mover in the National Football League, I believe that's how we continue to take that trend and move it upward. Because what we see from him on game day is unexpectedness, is surprises, is the opponent, again, hanging on for dear life, quite literally hanging on for dear life. He's hooked, he's held, he's cheap shotted, he's double teamed, he's triple teamed, he's chipped, right? They are doing everything to mug and try to bully this dude into not bringing down their quarterback. I believe that's exactly what he needs to face day in and day out in practice. And now we can do it in a safe way. We can do it where the intensity, the complexity, the information is scaled slightly and then gradually ramped up. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, pick up our book, Enhancing Skill in American Football. I'll show it to you for a little longer there. From 2025, myself, Tyler Yearby, and Rob Gray. The book where we put out and talked about how exactly when we might be able to scale complexity to meet each respective performer where they are, but to do so in setting problems that are alive and that require a performer to interact and reorganize what they're perceiving, how they're cognizing, and adaptively how they are acting. That's exactly what is asked of Myles every single snap. Now, so far, throughout his NFL career, he's been able to adapt because he's the world's best compensator. But could we actually leverage this? Could we actually set movement problems that bring more of this out from him? And as it brings more of this of him, it requires more of that from him, and he might just begin to solve problems in the way that he does on game day, in this super hyper adaptive compensating type of fashion, even more. That's my speculation. And because of that, it leads to three opportunities that, from both the weaknesses as well as leveraging his strengths, that I believe there's some more meat on the bone with, that I believe that there's some relatively low-hanging fruit for us to chase if we are thinking about player development, even for a player who's 30 years old and about to win his second Defensive Player of the Year award. The first one, taking J.J. Gibson's idea of skilled perception, looking to and through. If you guys watch the 23 sack video that I did where we walk slow motion through each one of the sacks, or if you went back and watched Week 11, Myles Garrett versus Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson and him sacking Lamar 4 times, I talk about how a defensive end could look to an immediate opponent or opponents in Myles Garrett's case. Remember, he's doubled or chipped 57% of the time in 2025. Okay. Every time you turn on the film, every time you hit the clicker, he's being doubled, tripled, or at least chipped. And there's a significant help coming to him, unexpectedness and surprises. So that perception getting wider so he can pick up threats to the left and to the right of the immediate blocker, typically a left tackle, maybe a right tackle, maybe a guard, depending if he's stunting or coming to the inside or moving throughout space, or if he's going and interacting first with a tight end or a chipper and then moving to the tackle, okay? Getting wider, but while getting wider, not just seeing flashes of color, but being able to pick up information so it's finer at the same time. Information about how that player is moving and how that relates to his potential opportunities to act, aka his affordances. And then at the same time, we have to remember what Myles Garrett is trying to do in every single one of these cases. What is he trying to do? He's trying to bring down a ball carrier, a quarterback or running back, or maybe a player on a jet sweep or something of the like. So you can see it on the picture against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's looking to an offensive tackle. He's looking through to a potential chipping help or where that guy might be going if he's going to escape out on a screen or something like that. And that's actually going to relate to one of our other opportunities that I feel like we need to get to. And then at the same time, guys and gals, he's simultaneously looking through to the quarterback and whom has the ball. So again, wider, finer, so you get those details. Longer and deeper, so you can get through, and then richer and fuller. So it starts to paint this picture. What is really there? And the thing is, we can never get too many pictures. As a player, in adapting over time, particularly one who right now relies a lot on physical prowess, physical gifts, physical capabilities, strength, power, speed, explosiveness, acceleration. At 30 years old, that will differ tremendously than that which what it will at 32 or 34, which is what it will take for him to be deemed the most dexterous to have ever done it from a defensive standpoint. So I believe there's some huge meat on the bone here that if we immerse him in more of these alive movement problems that are going to present more of these slices and snippets of the game, more exposures and experiences on the daily, if it's March or April, with his performance team, to stop doing as much isolated and decontextualized work, but instead to allow him to solve a wider range of movement problems from the jump year round. we can never get too many exposures. We can never step in too many rivers. We can never solve too many problems because no two movement problems are ever the same. Neither are any two movement solutions. So we want to lean in on this idea and expose him to as many movement problems as we possibly can. And that will drive this skilled perception wider, finer, longer, richer, and fuller, right? Let him interact with that more. I talked about how that opportunity sort of perpetually feeds into this opportunity. With 23 sacks, yes, he had 3 forced fumbles. But I want you all to think about this for a moment. Myles Garrett doesn't have a single interception across the entirety of his 9-year NFL career. Yes, I know he's an edge rusher. Yes, I know he's a defensive end. However, when he's always pinning his ears back, when he's always focused on bringing quarterback down, there are some times that he misses opportunities for and around the ball itself. And the ball is highly specifying, just like the player's behaviors will be. So behavior affords behavior. How your opponent is behaving and acting will feed into how you could or should act, right? Or how you might be able to act. And I believe there are some times that Myles actually misses what the ball means or affords him, what it could mean for his movement and how he should organize his movement actions around it. Yes, 3 forced fumbles, over 23 sacks. But I think there is more here. And I think we should expose him to it more in practice and in training so he can explore it more. It isn't just about tagging that guy off or bringing him down. And of course, he gets to do that in the game day over that 60 or 70 snaps that he might have on a game day. But how much is he really getting exposed to this on a day-to-day in training and practice? Again, I'm not just talking about practice in May and in June and then in August and September through the rest of the season. Because there, obviously, the quarterback's wearing a red jersey. And it can't just be somebody dropping back and they're a passive quarterback and they're just acting, they're just hanging the ball out there waiting for Myles to go get it. Or it can't just be a ball on a stick or a ball set on something that he has to go poke out. It has to be him interacting with a real life, alive human who is resisting him in some way. Resisting him in a way that they're trying to get the ball downfield, resisting him in a way that they're trying to get away so he can explore what the ball might afford him. When the ball is there to be had, there are more plays to be had. There are more ways for him to think about how he can influence and impact the game and go from here to there in a Lawrence Taylor, Ed Reed type of fashion. Again, I'm mentioning Ed Reed there just simply because I would consider him to be the upper echelon of defensive players and most, at least from a skillfulness standpoint, to have ever played the game, even though he plays a totally different position. But see ball, get ball, be oriented, educate your attention more around what the ball affords you so you can change your intentions and the adaptability of your actions oriented around getting the ball. Opportunity number 3 now is just to continue to find ways to allow him to wreak havoc. Okay. So this wreaking of havoc has, it would be deemed or coined or defined to just cause widespread destruction, chaos, and severe disruption. Create a mess, create disorder, inflict serious damage, make the situation of the what is much, much worse. That's who Myles Garrett is. That's the lion hunting the antelope in the jungle. That is who Myles Garrett is. And if you're in Myles Garrett's corner, if, like I'm speculating here, if he and I were to ever partner together, I would put him in as many different scenarios as we possibly can get and allow him to just create this big global intention. Go hunt, go be a predator, go create widespread chaos. wreak havoc. Now, that video of him where he's lined up inside over the center, where he's going back and forth like he's about to create, he's like dribbling a ball between his legs as Joe Burrow is trying to survey and process and look at the defense. It should be playing as a GIF. Obviously, it isn't at the moment for whatever reason. But go find it if you want to see what I'm talking about. He's in the midst of chaos. He's moving across the line of scrimmage. He starts acting, and I know that basketball is a big part of Myles' form of life. Just let him go create. Just let him go explore. Myles Garrett, how can you wreak more havoc? Myles Garrett, how can you make the situation of the what is worse for all 11 parties on that other side? And if you haven't seen that, as he dribbles through, he comes over and sort of like a pseudo simulated crossover, hezzy type of move before he goes and creates significant damage or destruction. Find ways of doing that. And if you're on the Cleveland Browns staff, find ways of doing that. Find ways of allowing Myles to explore in ways that he never thought even possible, or that you didn't think possible. Whether it's him being on every special teams unit to go create widespread destruction, whether it's him moving inside, outside, right side, left side, stand up, hand in dirt, dropping back. I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous, right? All he wants to do is hunt the quarterback. But what if we have him play more of a stand-up type of position? Think of a Lawrence Taylor. I know one's defensive end, one's an outside backer, or at least the hybrid off an outside linebacker. What if we have him drop back sometimes, and as he drops back, we get him really comfortable, creating chaos, ball in the air, or guys moving across his face? Would he find the ball in his hands, wreaking more havoc? Would he find ways where we have just this moving chess piece? Because that's who he is at the end of the day. Guys and gals, obviously, this was just sort of the tip of the iceberg, that if Myles Garrett and I ever partner together, where my focus, where my emphasis, where my objectives would be oriented. However, hopefully it makes some sense. If it does, and you kind of like what I'm talking about here, obviously check out Football Beyond the Stats a little bit more, where I talk a lot more about this idea of becoming one with the movement problems that are placed in front of players, the players themselves becoming one with. Football Beyond the Stats. We obviously talk a lot about it at Emergence, at emergentmovement.com, our movement skill education company. And then finally, I gave you the cheap plug before. You can see it right there on the screen. You can see it with me, Enhancing Skill in American Football. You can get it on Amazon today. We talk a lot about not only leveraging these ideas from contemporary skill acquisition science, as well as theory, as well as practice. I talk a lot about my practices, I talk a lot about my training, and I talk a lot about my approach towards supporting players like a Myles Garrett in their pursuit of enhanced dexterity, the ability to solve any emerging movement problem across situations and across conditions. And I believe that we can and should be doing this for every player that we partner with. It's not just Myles Garrett, even though he right now is his most dexterous self. He himself is the most dexterous player walking the face of the planet here in our 13th year of the Mover of the Year. So Myles Garrett, kudos to you, my friend. Thank you for putting and expressing your movement skill on the field every week for all of us to see. If you like this, hit thumbs up, share it with your people, comment in the comment section below. I'll talk to you all next time.